Keeping your development on track is really important for several reasons. First of all, if you have been lucky enough to sell it off plan, there will be an expectation of your client when that's going to be delivered. And if you don't keep it on track, then you're going to miss that expectation, that date you're going to deliver their house for them. Second is that there can be cost implications by having delays. Now, there are certain delays that you perhaps can't control, such as the weather, which will then maybe cause delays, but you can, by scheduling at the right time of year, help alleviate the possibility of those delays. But the cost implication may come in if you've borrowed money and you're therefore having to borrow that money over a longer period, then obviously there is a cost implication in doing that. And also the other thing is that you've got to make sure that everything is in place at the right time. So you're going to have to make sure your plant, materials and contractors all coordinate and are together so as that you create a flow of that process. Now, what's important is also the build route that you have chosen. So that will be a consideration in terms of the speed of that delivery. Incidentally, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe now. Only about 15% of the people who actually view these videos have subscribed. So it would be nice to see some loyalty paid by subscribing to the channel. There is, after all, almost 300 videos on this channel now. So I really would appreciate it if you would subscribe. So first thing that we want to look at is the build route, because this will have an impact on your actual build. Now, what I would say as a caveat to this is that you may not have the choice in terms of the build route, because it may depend on what contractors you have available to execute the type of build route that you need to put in place. But there are essentially two main build routes. There are lots of other different ways, but the main two, particularly as developers, that we tend to follow, it's traditional block construction or timber frame construction. Block construction, we need to wait until we've got the roof on before we can actually start working inside. That process obviously takes longer to build to be able to achieve that. One of the disadvantages of that is that you don't get wind and watertight for quite a long period of time, often about 8 weeks or so, depending on the size of the build, and therefore no work can continue inside. If you've got a period of inclement weather during that period of time, then your development then halts. However, if you use timber frame construction, you can get wind and watertight within 2 to 4 weeks, which means if you've got that period of inclement weather, work can be carrying on inside, even if not outside. So there's actually tends to be more work on the inside of a house than there is outside. So sooner you can get wind and watertight, the more easier it is to keep your build on track, because you can always catch up with the outside with the pace, because as I said, the pace of work inside is going to take longer than the pace of work outside. So it allows you to have that catch up. So the build route will have an impact in the term, the length of your development. Overall, providing you don't have any difficulties with inclement weather or delays, then they will take roughly about the same amount of time. And we do that. So the next thing that you need to think about is the sequencing of those particular build routes. So we have a chart where we lay out the sequencing week by week of what needs to take place. And this is fundamentally important to understand this, because you need to know when to have your materials on site, and you also need to know when to have your contractors on site. So you want your materials ready on site for when the particular contractor trade that's coming in to deliver that particular part of the project. You've got to make sure the materials are available to then execute the actual development. So if you don't have the materials available and then the contractor comes on and there's no work for them to do, what they'll often do is they'll then go off to another project, and they could be several weeks before they come back, because they might finish off that project and then come back to yours, by which time you will have the materials, but you will have delayed the whole process. And that will have a knock-on effect, because that contractor, the next contractor, perhaps relied on that contractor finishing their particular role. So it can have a huge knock-on effect. So it's really important that you coordinate and plan your plant, your materials and your contractors so that they are available at the right time. Looking at materials in particular, it's important that you understand the lead time for materials, that you negotiate your prices. It's very difficult to negotiate good prices on materials at the last minute, because at that time the most important thing to you is to have the materials available, because you're going to have your subcontractors on site looking to actually install and use those materials. So the most important thing is going to be to get those materials on site, and therefore you're going to be less concerned about price, or you don't have the ability to shop around to get the best price. So it's important that you do that. It's important also thinking of materials so that you have established, as I said before, the lead times, and therefore they are available when you need them, because sometimes some materials may have a long lead time. Sometimes materials which seem to be like almost next day or a couple of days, for some reason may be in shortage, and we've experienced that over the last few years, where there's been traditional materials that were readily available that are not, and they're very much on back order, and there's been great delays. So it's very important that you know your materials are going to be available. Part of that process is that you will have done costings, or you'll have a bill of quantities that tell you what materials that you need at an early stage, and that's going to be either you've done an estimation yourself, or you've got an estimating service to provide it, or quantity surveyor. So having those bill of quantities then allows you to get the materials on site at the right time. As I've touched on before, obviously contractors' availability is really important as well, because if you don't have those materials or plant in place, then you may have lost your time slot, and therefore they have gone on to another job, and that's going to cause you real serious delays. I do incidentally have a story, I call it Sandy's story, on page 71 of my book, You a Property Developer, where I outline the whole process from finding land to completing your build. So finding the land to putting the keys in your customer's hands, that whole process is outlined in this book, You a Property Developer. You can get a free copy of it. All I ask is you pay for the postage and packaging. And also I've created a free land finding course, so once you take delivery of the book, you'll be invited to join that land finding course and understand the process of finding off-market land that generates over 33% plus of GDV. I hope you found that useful, and if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe now. As I said before, there's over 300 videos on this site, and I look forward to speaking to you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.